Today in Final Fantasy, we get the final mythic from the main set, and it's a spicy one, along with a couple of super cool cards and so much more. Let's break it down. Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's time for another daily dose of Final Fantasy spoilers. So we've reached the end of week 2 of this super long 3-week spoiler season, and we got some spicy cards to talk about today. A really interesting mythic, some very playable vehicles, and a bunch more, which means we should probably jump right into it, start talking sweet new Final Fantasy cards. Before we do, 2 quick reminders. First, to keep up on all the latest spoilers throughout the day, you should head on over to MTGpreviews.com. Second, if you need any of these cards, you can pre-order them from our sponsor Card Kingdom over at cardkingdom.com/MTGGoldfish. Anyway, let's talk some Final Fantasy. First up today, we get what I'm pretty sure is the final mythic of the set, which is interesting because we still have another whole week of spoilers to go, but at least it's a very interesting one in Gogo, Master of Mimicry. So it's a 3-mana 2/4 blue creature. It's a legendary wizard, and it says pay double X and tap it, copy target activated or triggered ability you control X times. You can choose new targets for the copy. This ability can't be copied, and X can't be 0. Also, mana abilities can't be targeted. That's not a Gogo thing. That's a mana abilities don't go on the stack, so there's nothing to actually copy there. So Gogo, we've never really seen a card exactly like this before. There's a few cards in Magic that can copy activated or triggered abilities. All of them are pretty much one-shots though. Lithiform Engine, for 2 mana you can tap it and copy it, or Virtue of Knowledge, it's Vantress Vision mode, 2 mana copy an activated or triggered ability. So we've never really seen something like Gogo that can just copy an ability a ton of times. So what does this card actually do? So if you're thinking about activated and triggered abilities, you're really looking for 2 things on a Magic card. So triggered abilities are pretty much always going to have the word when or whenever on them, like Helpful Hunter. When this creature enters, draw a card. So that's a triggered ability. When it enters, it puts a trigger on this deck that says draw a card. You could pay 2 mana to Gogo and copy that ability and draw an extra card. You could pay 4 mana to Gogo and copy it twice and draw 2 extra cards. You could pay, 100 mana to Gogo and copy it 50 times and draw your deck and mill out. But you know what I'm saying. Or like Gold Vein Hydra. When this creature dies, create a number of tap treasures equal to its power. So when Gold Vein Hydra dies, it puts a trigger on this deck. Gogo can copy it a bunch of times. Whenever is the other word you're looking for. This is often on attack triggers like Aurelia. Whenever Aurelia attacks, for the first time each combat, untap all creatures you control. There's an initial combat phase. If you got Gogo out, you put the Aurelia trigger on this deck, you copy it, you get a whole bunch of combats. So that is triggered abilities. Then we have activated abilities. Activated abilities, what you're really looking for is a colon, mostly. Abilities that say, like Braided Net. Tap this, remove a net counter from Braided Net, colon, do this thing, which is tap a non-land permanent. Or Drafna, 3 mana, tap it, colon, copy target artifact spell you control. Or Hero's Bane, 4 mana, colon, put X+1/+1 counters on this, where X is the creature's power. So these are activated abilities, where you pay an amount of mana usually, or tap the thing, do something, and then you get an effect. Gogo can copy all of them as well. So if you Braided Net, you can Gogo that ability, and tap down a bunch of things. If you Drafna, you can copy its artifact copying ability and copy it a bunch of times. Hero of Bane, you can make it super huge. So those are the kind of things that Gogo can do. It's also worth mentioning, we got some interesting support for this effect in Standard. Agatha Soul Cauldron, really sweet because it moves abilities around. You could give other creatures Gogo's abilities. Enigma Jewel gives you mana to pay for activated abilities. So those cards can be interesting support for Gogo. So what do we do with this card in Standard? And honestly, I think this card is mostly a combo piece. And there may be a combo for it in Standard. I haven't really found a good one yet. If you have ideas of how we can easily go infinite with Gogo at Standard, definitely let me know. There's a bunch of combos once you get back to older formats in Commander. So one thing we could do is just use it to copy Enter's abilities. But if you're doing that, you're kind of just getting a Panharmonicon effect. It's a Panharmonicon effect with the downside of costing mana, but the upside that you can do it multiple times. Well, imagine if you had enough mana, you could play a Sunspine Lynx, put its Enter's ability that deals damage equal to the number of non-basic lands each player controls on the stack, and then Gogo copy it 2 times, 3 times, maybe just kill your opponent on the spot, or Overlord of the Hall Smallwoods. You impend it. It's going to make this everywhere land. Then you copy it with Gogo, make a bunch of lands. Or Shiko, you can flashback a bunch of stuff from your graveyard. So you can use it for value. My concern here is it just seems kind of expensive, right? You need like 5 mana to cast Shiko, then you need a Gogo, then you need at least 2 mana to activate Gogo. If you want to do it multiple times, you're going to need like 9 total mana, 11 total mana, which is just a lot of mana to have access to. So if you have a ton of mana, it can do ridiculous things. But I think if it's actually going to be competitive in Standard, it's probably going to be as a combo piece. It's also hilarious with stuff like Obeka. Obeka, when it deals combat damage, you get that many additional upkeep steps after this phase. So Gogo can copy that. You get it with Obeka, get probably 2 extra upkeeps, but then you can copy it with Gogo and get 4 or 6 or 8 extra upkeeps, which with extra support could do some ridiculous things. The best combo I found so far, and it's not a very good one, is Unstoppable Planned Realm Reborn, and then something like Realm Scorcher Hellkite is the finisher. So it's a lot of pieces, but when you look at Gogo combos, the easiest way to combo with it is effects that can untap multiple things. So like Unstoppable Planned, at the beginning of your end step, you untap all non-land permanents you control. If you have a Realm Reborn down, all your other permanents tap for mana. So if you have Unstoppable Planned, you have a bunch of random creatures on the battlefield. You can go to your end step, you can put the Unstoppable Plan trigger on the stack to untap all your stuff, then you can use Gogo to copy that ability, you can float all the mana from all your permanents with Realm Reborn, and then you untap them all, then your Gogo's gonna untap, and then you can copy the Unstoppable Plan's ability again. Essentially, if you have enough things that make mana, you're gonna generate infinite mana doing this. The problem is, you're making it during your end step, so you can't like cast a sorcery or empty your hand, but if you have something like Realm Scorcher Hellkite, which has an ability that's 2 to deal 1 damage to any target, then you can use all that infinite mana to actually just burn your opponent out of the game. So obviously, this is 4 cards, like 20 mana. You gotta have them all on the battlefield. Not something that's super realistic for a competitive plan, but could be a sweet against the odds episode. Also worth mentioning, this can just be an absurd ramp spell. If you crack a fetch land like a Valving Wilds or a Flooded Strand, you can pay 2 and copy that ability to get an extra land. So it's kind of like blue rampant growth, but if you have enough mana, you could copy it 2 times or 3 times and get 2 or 3 extra lands. So it is kind of spicy as a weird ramp spell with fetch lands. It's also super cute with like Mindslaver. Imagine Mindslaver your opponent, but then copying that ability 2 times, 3 times, controlling your opponent for the next 3 or 4 turns. Door to Nothingness in Commander. If you can Gogo it enough times, you can kill the entire table with 1 activation by making everyone lose the game instead of just 1 player. As far as combos, in Commander, you're mostly looking for things that make a lot of mana and things that can untap those things and also Gogo. Like, for example, let's say you have a Teferi Temporal Archmage, a Thran Dynamo, a Gilded Lotus, and a Gogo. What you can do is use Teferi's -1 ability, which says untap up to 4 target permanents. Then you float your mana from Thran Dynamo, you float your mana from the Gilded Lotus, you pay 2 to your Gogo to copy Teferi's ability, and then when Teferi's ability resolves, it'll untap the Gogo, the Thran Dynamo, the Gilded Lotus. Then you do it again. You tap the Thran Dynamo, you tap the Gilded Lotus, you tap the Gogo to copy the Teferi trigger, you generate more mana than you're spending on the Gogo, you make infinite mana, use it to win the game. It also goes infinite on your upkeep with Sands of Time. Sands of Time says at the beginning of each player's upkeep, you untap each tapped artifact creature land they control and tap each untapped artifact creature land that they control. So you can put this trigger on the stack, then you can copy it with Gogo, float all your mana, tap and untap, make infinite mana, heavily to win on your upkeep. It also seems good in like the 99 is something like Zur. Zur, when it attacks, you can tutor up an enchantment mana value 3 or less, but if you have Gogo out, you could be getting 2 or 3 or 4 enchantments by copying that trigger and setting up some sort of lock or combo that wins the game. So Gogo, I absolutely love this card. We've never seen a card like Gogo before. It does something super unique. It's got a ton of combos. I'm not sure any of those combos are actually good outside of Commander, but this card has me very intrigued. So if you have some ideas of how we can break Gogo in a format like Standard or Pioneer Modern, definitely let me know, because I'm very interested in seeing if we can find a way to make this card into an absurd combo piece. We also got a couple of interesting vehicles, starting with the Lunar Whale. So the Lunar Whale, a 4-mana 3/5 legendary vehicle. It's a blue card. It has flying. It says you can look at the top card of your library at any time, and as long as it attacked this turn, you can play the top card of your library, and you crew it for 1. So worth mentioning, play means you can play lands and you can cast spells, so it is a good version of that effect. So the Lunar Whale, if you want a comparison, It's basically a very upgraded version of the Belligerent. The Belligerent kind of did the same thing as a 4-mana vehicle that when you attack, you get a treasure until end of turn. You look at the top card of your library and you can play lands and cast spells from the top of your library. The problem with the Belligerent, other than the fact that it's sailing over a waterfall for some reason, is the crew cost is 3 and it's a ground creature, so it's hard to use it multiple times because if you attack with it, it's probably just going to die in combat and then it's a one-shot. The Lunar Whale, on the other hand, thanks to flying, much more easier to use multiple turns in a row. So I'm glad they upgraded the Belligerent because the Belligerent was not especially close to being playable. Perhaps the most interesting thing about this card to me is I'm kind of desensitized to playing things off the top of your deck. If you go back to like the first 20 years of Magic, this effect was incredibly rare. You had Future Sight way back in Onslaught. You got Magus of the Future eventually, like 10 years later, referencing it. But it was an incredibly rare effect. But in the last few years, Wizards have started to use this effect really aggressively. Just look at the last few sets. You got Traveling Chocobo to play lands and birds off the top of your deck. You got Augur of Autumn that lets you play lands and creatures off the top of your deck. You got Glarb that lets you play things with mana value 4 greater and lands off the top of your deck. Case of the Locked Hothouse lets you play creatures and lands and enchantments from the top of your deck. So we went from this effect being incredibly rare to being incredibly common. So now I see it, I'm like, okay, it's cool. It's another way that you can play stuff off the top of your deck, but it's not like super exciting anymore. Maybe the best part about this card is flying. If you look at vehicles that see play in Constructed, they mostly have flying. The exception are ones that like generate bodies like Azeka's Chariot or whatever. But in general, if you're playing a vehicle, you really want it to fly. And it's doubly true of a vehicle like the Lunar Whale, where you really need to be able to attack with it repeatedly to get value out of it. So the fact that this has flying is a super huge deal to maybe making it playable. Also worth mentioning, we got a lot of vehicle support in Standard thanks to Ether Drift. And this card would work really well with like Muyang Lang, Chandra Spark Hunter, Collodin Triumph Caster. So maybe we get some sort of vehicle deck where you play this, you attack with it, you get some value, some card advantage casting things off the top of your deck. The same is mostly true of Commander. In Commander, if you're playing this, you're probably playing a vehicle deck. Something like Shiriki, Katori, Edward Kenway. In that deck, though, it's going to be very good. And I think that's what Wizards is trying to do with the play off the top of your library effects. If you look at the ones they've printed, they're essentially printing that effect at a cheaper rate than Future Sight, but only for specific decks. So the Lunar Whale, if you want to play off the top of your library and you're a vehicle deck, this is the card for you. Also worth mentioning, you can do Future Sight combos with it. The traditional classic Future Sight combo, Sensei's Divining Top, some sort of cost reduction effect for Sensei's Divining Top to make it free, and then you just get to draw your deck. You attack with the Lunar Whale, so you can play off the top of your deck. Sensei's Divining Top, you can just tap it to draw a card, put it on the top of your deck, then you can play it off the top of your deck for free, then you can tap it, draw another card. So essentially you just draw your entire deck, and you should be able to win somehow if you can draw literally your entire deck. So the Lunar Whale, I like this card. It's the best version of a vehicle that lets you play cards off the top of your library. It could have standard implications in some sort of vehicle deck. Definitely cool in Commander vehicle decks. Speaking of 4-mana vehicles, we got another one that I really like in the Regalia. So the Regalia, 4-mana legendary vehicle. It's colorless. It's a 4/4 with haste. It crews for 1. And it says when it attacks, you reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a land card. Put that on the battlefield tab, the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So the Regalia, I really love this card. If you're looking for comparisons, it's kind of like a Bitterthorn Nissa's Animus, a Lumbering Worldwagon, these things that can attack and get you a land, but it's way better than those because it's worded like Open the Way, and I have really come to value ramp effects like Open the Way that just put random lands into play from your deck because you're not restricted to playing a bunch of basic lands. With Bitterthorn or Lumbering Worldwagon, you gotta overload your deck on basics to make sure you have something to tutor up, but with the Regalia, you could be playing literally 0 basics, and it's still gonna ramp you every single turn. Also, kind of reminds me a little bit of Fleetwheel Cruiser as a hasty 4-drop vehicle with pretty good stats, although Fleetwheel Cruiser had the upside of like crewing itself when it entered the battlefield. The Regalia, though, it's only 1 to crew, so as long as you have any random 1/1 on the battlefield, you can hop in the car, start doing some ramping. So this is another card that works well in the vehicle decks. I don't know what you're ramping into in the vehicle decks exactly, I guess bigger vehicles, but it does work with Chandra and Collodin and Muyang Lang, although maybe the best home for this card is actually like a landfall deck. We got a lot of pieces in Standard with Traveling Chocobos and Bristly Bills and Mossborn Hydras for some sort of landfall deck, and this seems pretty sweet. You play it, you attack with it, it's gonna get the land before you deal damage, so it's gonna trigger all your landfall stuff to grow all your things, and then maybe you just one-shot your opponent with this huge board of landfall things. So it seems really sweet in landfall. My biggest concern with this card is I really wish it was bigger than a 4/4. The problem with being a 4/4 is right now in Standard, we got cards like Biza and Shielder of the Apocalypse, Abhorrent Oculus, which are just big enough to take down the Regalia. This card, if it's a one-shot and you're like, I attack, jump into your Biza, my Regalia dies, I get one land, that's not very good. You really want to be able to attack with it repeatedly. So we'll have to see if it lines up well enough with the meta, but it does seem powerful, especially in some sort of landfall deck. In Commander, we see cards like Bitterthorn, sort of the Animus, sort of Hearth and Home, see a lot of play is just a repeatable ramp effect, and I think Regalia, like I mentioned before, is some ways better than that. I really value ramp that can put non-basic lands into the play, to the point where I play something like Clifftop Retreat in Commander over a Cultivate effect, just because I don't want to have to play like 20 basics in my deck to make sure I have something to find with Cultivate. So I'm really hyped about the Regalia, because to me this looks like my version of Bitterthorn or Sword of Hearth and Home that I don't have to overload on basics. It can still do my repeatable ramping. So gonna be at its best in probably a vehicle deck, Balather and Fran, Katori, Shikori, Edward Kenaway. Although really, I think you can play this in other decks too. It seems really good to me in Mono White. Mono White kind of struggles with ramping. Its best ramp effects, it has good ramp effects, but its ramp effects are dependent on you being lower on lands than your opponent, like Loyal Warhound, these catch-up ramp effects. I really like that the Regalia isn't a catch-up ramp effect. It's colorless, so you can play it in Mono White, and Mono White's really good at just having random creatures on the battlefield, like Spirited Companion, to draw a card and trigger your Enduring Innocence, because White's kind of the color of these little weenie creatures, so it seems pretty easy to have a random creature lying around to crew up the Regalia, and then once your catch-up ramp is turned off, then the Regalia can keep you ramping, help make sure you stay up with the green decks. I've also seen people be hyped about this for Bellow. I feel like Bellow was turning into the new Prosper, where whenever there's like an artifact or an enchantment with mana value 4 or greater, people are like, oh, it's gonna be good in Bellow, which is probably true, but like, it's kind of boring. So the Regalia, I really like this card. I'm intrigued by its possibilities in Standard, but I'm convinced that it's gonna be really, really good in Commander for sure. Next up is a card that actually could be an important piece of a traditional equipment deck working in Standard, and Raubahn, Bull of Allah Mhigo. So it's a 2-mana 2/2 legendary human warrior. It has Ward of Pay Life equal to its power, and then when it attacks, you can attach up to 1 target equipment you control to target attacking creature. So essentially, this is another way that we can potentially equip things for free, which is going to be really important if cards like Buster Sword and all the other equipment from the Final Fantasy set are going to work in Standard. So if you want comparisons for this card, it's got the Ward of Phyrexian Fleshgorger, which it's very interesting on this card. So when you play this on turn 2, its ward isn't going to do much to protect it. Your opponent can still kill it and take 2 damage, but if you can get some equipment loaded up on this, it can kind of become unkillable if you get its power high enough. And then it's free equipping. The only card I could find that free equips when it attacks is Shagrat from the Lord of the Rings set. So we've never really had this effect in Standard before. The biggest downside of its free equip is it's when it attacks, not whenever anything attacks. So you do need to play this and wait a turn for it to lose Summoning Sickness and then attack. But if you can do that, the reward is pretty high. So let's get the bad news out of the way first. The bad news of this card is, as a 2/2, it does die to Burst Lightning. It does die to Cut Down the turn you play it. And if you play this, your opponent's going to be thinking, they're probably going to drop some scary equipment and equip it for free. So there is an incentive to kill this card. The ward, like I said before, it's something, it's nice. Even if it dies, you get a couple damage out of it. But it becomes much stronger once you start building up some equipment on this card. So if you can dodge, like the first turn you play this card, the removal spells, and start equipping it, then it can become very, very powerful. It's also kind of like Stolen Uniform, and that's what kind of makes me hyped about this card, is now we have not just 1, but 2 different ways that we can equip equipment for free in Standard, which might be enough to make a deck around this effect. Usually if you have 1 version of an effect in Standard, it's hard to really build a deck around it because you might not draw that card. It's 1 card or 4 cards out of 60, but if you have 2 versions of an effect, then it's enough consistency that you can actually build a deck around it. So maybe we'll see some sweet Raubahn Stolen Uniform decks in Standard. It works especially well with 3-mana equipment. If you consider the curve of Raubahn, you play it on turn 2, You gotta wait until it loses Summoning Sickness. So on turn 3, you can drop a Buster Sword, or a Sword of Forge in Frontier, or a Lotus Ring, I guess. Attack, equip it for free, get this massive Raubahn going, or you can also equip to another creature if you have like a 1-drop on the battlefield. So that's one way to build around this card, is just plan on curving 2-mana Raubahn into 3-mana equipment. It's also very good with the hard-to-equip equipment we have in Standard. Stuff like the Ether Spark, which is so much better if you don't have to spend its +1 to equip it. A Terran Pyrwin Ultima Weapon. These are equipment that are just way too expensive to actually equip fairly, but something like Raubahn lets you get around that altogether and just equip them for free, so it makes these cards much more playable. It also works really well with haste. Unfortunately, there's not an easy way to like get haste on turn 1, plus you wouldn't have an equipment when you played Raubahn on turn 2 anyway, but if you can get down like a Frostcleft Siege or a Fire Crystal, you can play your equipment, then play Raubahn, have it come down with haste, immediately equip, get in this huge attack to maybe win the game. When you add all this together, there might actually be enough support to make an equipment deck in Standard. We got Cloud and Kallen as tutors that also add bodies to the battlefield to put equipment on. We got Raubahn now as a way to free equip. We got stuff like Nahiri. We have good equipment removal. Chainsaw early game removal that isn't equipment. Rebel Salvo kills bigger things but benefits from having equipment. So I'm starting to think that maybe, and I don't know how competitive this deck will be, but the pieces definitely exist to build what looks like a fairly strong equipment deck. I'm still a little skeptical just because it's been so long since equipment have actually been good in Standard, at least traditional equipment. I know equipment that make their own bodies like Corey Steelcutter or whatever, that's a different story, but traditional equipment where you have to honest to goodness pay mana to put them on creatures, it's been a long time, but I think the pieces might exist thanks to Final Fantasy and some of the cards left over in Standard that we can build this deck now. Maybe it's like a tier 3 fun deck, maybe it's a tier 1 super powerful deck, but the pieces are all there. As far as other formats, I don't think this card is anywhere near fast enough for Modern Hammer Time, but it could be in the conversation for Pioneer Hammer Time. Pioneer Hammer Time, a little bit slower. You don't have all the free equip pieces that you get in Modern, and I could see this being a fine 2-drop in the deck. In Pioneer, since the format's not as fast as Modern, playing this Hammer on turn 1, Raubahn on turn 2, turn 3 attack, free equip it, hit you for a bunch of damage, that actually seems like it could be fine in Pioneer. As far as Commander is concerned, this is the card that I'm definitely most interested in the 99 of other equipment decks. Yes, you can build a Raubahn deck if you want to, and it's just going to be an equipment Voltron deck. You just play it, you play as much equipment as you can, try to load it up, trust that the ward is going to give you some protection, and build this massive Raubahn and use it to smash your opponent to death. But I think it's going to be at its best in like Captain America or Wylith or Velduk, where you can just play this in the 99 and use it as another way to get equipment on your commander, whatever your best creature is at the time. So Raubahn, I really like this card a lot. I think it could be good in Standard. Little worried that you got on tap with it, but it's only 2 mana. The ward is nice once you get it going, and this might be the final piece of the puzzle to actually having a real equipment deck in Standard. Moving on, we get a few more cards from the Final Fantasy Through the Ages sheet, mostly pretty popular commander stuff. Sir Conrad the Grim, popular black commander card. Kenneth the Return King, one of the most popular 5-color commanders. Chromatic Lantern, good fixing in some sort of 5-color deck, so nothing crazy value-wise, but some cool stuff to bling out your commander deck if you're a Final Fantasy fan. As far as lower rarity cards, we got a few worth shouting out. Reach the Horizons, 4-mana sorcery, search your library for up to 2 basic lands and or town cards with different names, put them on the battlefield tapped and shuffle. This card's worth mentioning just because of the town effect. It's essentially Circuitous Route, but for towns rather than gates. Yes, you gotta get 2 different ones, which I guess is a slight twist, but we saw Route C play in gate decks. If there's a town deck, then Reach the Horizons is going to be an important part of it, but if you're not playing towns, there's better 4-mana ramp 2 options out there. We also got World Map, a 1-mana artifact where you can pay 1 tap and sack it to search your library for a basic land, reveal and put it in your hand and shuffle, or you can pay 3 and sack it to search your library for any land, reveal, put it in your hand and shuffle. So if this sounds familiar, it's basically standard expedition map at home. Expedition map, 1 to cast, 2 to crack it, and you can just always get any land. The thing about World Map, its upside is you can get a basic land for 1 mana. The problem is you don't play Expedition Map to get a basic land. If you're getting a basic land, you're going to play something that just ramps it directly to the battlefield. So I'm not sure this card actually has uses anywhere. Maybe in some sort of artifact deck in Standard that really wants to get their Fomori Vault or whatever. But in general, it's just a slightly less efficient expedition map. We also got a new red legend in Prompto Argentum, and this card might be playable. This feels to be like a card that like 5 years ago would have been really good in standard. I don't know if it's good enough now. So it's a 2-mana 2/2 with haste. It's a legendary human scout, and it says when you cast a non-creature spell, if at least 4 mana was spent to cast it, create a treasure token. So why would Prompto be standard playable? And the answer is, if you look at 2-mana 2/2s with haste in standard, they actually have a very good track record of being playable. Emberheart Challenger sees play right now, Bloodthirsty Adversary, Felden saw play for a while, Robber of the Rich was a staple. So 2-mana 2/2 hasters tend to be good. So that would make me think that Prompto would be good. However, the big concern I have for this card is it doesn't fit into the current red aggro decks. There's two big ones, right? Which is it prowess, which I guess you could say it kind of fits there because of casting non-creature spells, but you don't really have 4-mana non-creature spells, so it doesn't really fit in the prowess deck. And then the other big red aggro deck is the mouse deck, and it's not a mouse, so it doesn't really fit in the mouse deck. So I feel like this is a card, if we end up in a world where just generic mono red was a thing again, and it wasn't based on mouse synergies or based on spellslinger prowess synergies, Prompto could have a home. But right now, I feel like the red decks are just too synergistic for just a generic 2/2 haster, but worth keeping in mind in the future because, like I said, the track record on 2-mana 2/2 hasters in red is very good in standard. We also got a key card for Random Dude Eating a Sandwich Tribal, which is a deck that I've been working on ever since Doctor Who released. An Ignis Scientia, a 3-mana Simic 2/2 human advisor. It's a legend, of course. It says when it enters, look at the top 6 cards of your library and put a land card from among them on the battlefield. Tap, put the rest on the bottom in a random order, and then you can pay 3 and tap it to exile a card from a graveyard, and if it was a creature, you make a food token. So Ignis, it's basically a bigger but 2-color and legendary version of Elvish Rejuvenator. And it digs 1 card deeper, which is nice. Elvish Rejuvenator has seen play before. This is another ramp spell that doesn't require you to play a bunch of basic lands, which I do like. So I think that this card could have a home. Like 3-mana ramp is kind of the going rate in standard. We've seen Rejuvenator see play in the past, and then its activated ability of exiling a card from a graveyard. I don't think you can really depend on it because it's too much mana, but there are going to be situations where your opponent goes to reanimate an Oculus or something, and you can snipe it with Ignis, and that's going to be really powerful. So we'll see where this actually ends up, but in some sort of ramp deck, I think it could be a fine option. We also got a new town in the Golden Saucer. So the Golden Saucer, it's a land, it makes colorless. You can pay 2 and tap it to flip a coin. If you win the flip, you make a treasure. Or you can pay 3 and tap it and sack 2 artifacts to draw a card. So the Golden Saucer, it's kind of like Fountain Port at home, I think. Probably a worse Fountain Port in most decks, but making a treasure, actually pretty powerful. The risk with the Golden Saucer is you're only 50% to make a treasure. So when you consider it's technically 3 mana, right, to tap it and pay the 2, and you're going to have to do this twice on average to get a treasure, pay 6 to make a treasure is kind of a lot, although sack 2 artifacts for 3 to draw a card isn't super inefficient. So the Golden Saucer, I think it goes up in value if you're some sort of coin flip deck. If you're playing Carrick's Thumb or New Edgar, and you can increase your odds of winning the flip. If this is pay 2, make a treasure, or I guess 3 because you have to tap the Golden Saucer, that's actually a very efficient way to make a treasure on a land. Could also show up in some artifact decks, mostly for the sacking artifact mode. We have like the Simulacrum Synthesizer repurposing Bay decks in standard. Being able to like sack an artifact or an extra one that your opponent's targeting with removal or something seems like it could be fine. In Commander, I think there's a couple of places I'm interested in this card. So outside of the coin flip decks that we already talked about, which are pretty fringe in Commander, but if you're flipping coins, you're probably going to play this. It seems cute in like Lannis or Samwise, these commanders that can make a ton of artifact tokens, and then this can cash in the artifact tokens, turning them into cards with its last ability. Plus you're probably playing like Academy Manufacturer, which makes its treasure production even better. The other place could be decks that actively want to sack artifacts, like Duretti Scrap Savant. Really good at getting artifacts in and out of the graveyard. So the Golden Saucer, just being able to sack an artifact that you want to get in the graveyard to reanimate, could actually be a nice option there as well. So the Golden Saucer, I don't think this is like a Fountain Port land that you can play in any deck, but in the right deck, it does seem like it could be pretty powerful. We also got a couple of draft chaff cards that you can check out over at MTGpreviews.com. Anyway, that brings us to the end of our daily Final Fantasy spoilers for today, and to the end of week 2 of Final Fantasy spoiler season. But don't worry, we got one more week to go full of sweet Final Fantasy cards. So which card from today are you most hyped about? What are you most excited about from this week of spoiler season? What do you think of the set now that we're 2 weeks in? Let me know in the comments, and I'll be back tomorrow or maybe Monday, depending on exactly how many spoilers we get over the weekend, with even more Final Fantasy spoilers. So until then, have an amazing day, everyone, and I will talk to you soon. Looking for even more magic? Well, check out yesterday's Against the Odds, where we did some Throne of the God Pharaoh in Standard. And of course, you can find our last spoiler video right here.